All right, if everyone can make their way back in, we're ready to get started with the next talk. And this time we have two special guests, so we're excited about that. Kate Beard is a registered dietitian with a decade of pediatric nutrition experience and a master's in nutrition from Ball State University. In her role as a senior pediatric dietitian with the developmental medicine and GI clinics at Riley Children's Health at IU North, she blends clinical skills with the lived insight of being a mom to a child with complex needs. And then we also have Casey Rutherford. Cassandra Rutherford is a registered dietitian with 5 years of pediatric nutrition experience. As a pediatric dietitian at Riley Children's and a parent herself, she enjoys partnering with families to make complex nutrition and feeding challenges feel more manageable. She's passionate about translating evidence-based recommendations into practical strategies, recognizing that every child is different and the best plans are often ones that adapt to real life. So I'm going to turn the time over to them.
Thank you everyone for having us today at your conference. It's so nice to be here and see all of your faces. As she said, my name is Kate. This is Casey. We are friends. We work at Riley Children's Hospital with kids. That's our specialty area. Specifically, I work a lot with nutrition support. That's kind of my niche area. My son has a feeding tube, and so this is kind of our life every day. And so that's what I really like doing, working with families. Is still meeting those nutritional needs and those family needs of meal times, but just through a tube. And Casey is my partner in the GI clinic and developmental medicine clinic. She has a lot of experience with constipation and some of those GI issues that she'll share here today. Really what our message and our goal for today to talk about is gentle strategies. We understand that the goal of food it's a family experience, and that's what we really want to support. Meeting kids where they're at is really important for us. So trying to offer strategies to make it more accessible, and just if you can take a couple things that would be applicable to your life at home, that'd be helpful, but take what you want and leave everything that you don't want. We really want to view today through a developmental and a food group lens. And so we're going to focus on that intersection between nutrition and specific 11Q priorities. Lindsay had shared with us some specific goals and focus and priorities of this group related to selective eating, constipation, sleep, and immunity. So we really wanted to focus on those specifically and then leave time for Q&A at the end. Nutrition is such a broad topic, and we're just going to talk about a couple things, but we're more than happy to answer other questions that you think of at the end. So we're going to save some time for that. All right.
So, excuse me. So one of the goals that we really, like Kate mentioned, wanted to hit home with was that we want a healthy relationship with food and a positive mealtime experience, right? So we want you all to feel like at the dinner table, it's not a fight, it's enjoyable. We're building memories, right? We have a lot of feeding goals and nutrition goals and all these different things that we want for our family and for our children. But at the end of the day, we want this to be as least stressful as we can, right? One of the things that we also like to talk about is reliability and flexibility. You need both to be successful with feeding and nutrition. Reliability builds trust. Flexibility makes you a human being. So an example I like to use is when you're on a road trip and you don't know where the next rest stop is and you really need to use the restroom. It causes a lot of anxiety and stress. Same goes for feeding. Having regularly scheduled meal times planned is great. You don't end up with a child being overly hungry or anxious or stressed, right? When you know when your next meal is coming. However, life happens and we need to be flexible, and we need to go to Chick-fil-A, or we need to go to Pizza Hut, or we're busy at the end of the day and we just need something to be simple. And that is just as important as that structure. Your kids need to see that. And so something I like to talk about is consider losing some of those food rules. So the idea that you have to have dessert after dinner, or eggs are always at breakfast, or you need to always serve vegetables. We do the best that we can. We throw some of those rules out the window, and then meal times become less stressful. And then something else we talk about is that there are no wrong food pairings. So instead of asking, is this the right food for this mealtime? Is it okay that I want to serve donuts with dinner? Think about, does this meet their needs? Are we getting the different food groups? Right? You don't always have to serve a vegetable with dinner. You can have vegetables for breakfast. You can have ice cream with breakfast. Depending on what we're trying to do, that's what we want to focus on. Okay. And then another example is if a child only eats pasta, we don't eliminate it, right? We ask, how can we use this pasta as a vehicle to get other things into our child? We don't make it all about that specific food. What can we do with that food to do other things? Some other helpful strategies: keep all foods on a level playing field. And they all serve different purposes. All foods do different things in our bodies, and we don't want children growing up feeling like foods are good or bad. Try and use neutral food language when you can. I do this a lot with the families that I work with. They'll come in and they'll say, well, they did not eat great. They ate a lot of bad foods over the weekend. And so I'll ask them to explain, and they'll reference going to McDonald's or having more fried foods. Those foods serve a purpose. They gave your child energy. They made your life easier. That's appropriate, and that's what our goal is. Okay. And then we want to try and avoid pressure with food. In certain instances, feeding therapists and things like that can work on different strategies with you, and we'll talk about what that role looks like. But when we pressure children to eat certain foods or to eat their vegetables first before dessert, it actually tends to backfire, and children are less inclined to want to eat it, and then they have less of a good experience with their meal times and their foods. And then lastly, we want it to be fun. So something I've done with my own child is we'll have dino chicken nuggets and we'll have gravy with it. And we will play with them in the gravy, climbing up the mashed potato mountain. That is something I do with my own child. When you're working with children who have feeding tubes, adding stickers to syringes, or letting them help their teddy bear set up their own tube, making feeding fun is so important and such a huge part of this process and continuing to make eating nutrition enjoyable. Some other examples that my husband and I have tried to implement are having picnics. We have picnics regularly in our living room, and we put out a variety of dips. And it gets messy, and it goes against every type A fiber in my being to let there be mess. But it also has helped with her and any sensory aversions that she may or may not have. Just to continue to explore and get messy and learn and have fun. So those are a lot of the things that we work on. We wanted to briefly talk about the intersection of dietitian and feeding therapist. I believe a feeding therapist talks later, which we're excited about. Feeding therapists can be speech therapists, occupational therapists, and depending on who you're working with, what exactly they work on can be different. So dietitians, I put a lot of our responsibilities up on the slide. We look at growth and development. We look at what your child is eating. Are they getting the various food groups? Are they getting enough calories? Are they getting different protein needs? Are they staying well hydrated? Do they meet their vitamin and mineral requirements? Are they getting enough iron? Those sorts of things are what we look at. We monitor for things like deficiencies, and then we also work specifically with medical needs. So sometimes working with children with diabetes, where we need to manage insulin levels and things like that. We oversee tube feedings and then provide overall nutrition strategies to support growth and development. So we'll come up with some ways to modify a meal structure or ways to increase calories or supplement if we need to. So we focus a lot on that side of things. Now, feeding therapist, depending again on what their role is, they can work on oral motor skills. So things like chewing, tongue movements, like being able to move your tongue from side to side, lateralization up and down, using a cup or straw drinking, evaluating and making recommendations for safety. So like swallow studies, is it safe for them to swallow? Is there risk for aspiration? As well as sensory processing. So they'll work on like texture sensitivity and ways to navigate that, tolerance to new foods, and different feeding behavior, whether it be refusal and having that trust and comfort with food. And so at the end of the day, we say same goal, different goals, right? You need both. You need to feel confident, you need to feel skilled and feel like you have the ability to eat and do these things, but you need the nutrition to grow and thrive. So we all work together on a team depending on what your child needs support in. If swallowing and swallow safety is a concern, you'll likely work with someone like a speech therapist for feeding. If your child struggles with a lot of sensory aversions or behavioral concerns with eating, an OT may be a better option. Really kind of teasing that out can be helpful when looking at what sort of feeding support you do need.
All right, and going towards that selective eater from that frame of the dietitian mindset, the data shows that for selective eating, specifically this study was done on a very profound type of selective eating called RFID, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. Children who are able to have 16 safe foods, so specifically thinking about a more diverse group of from categories like fruits, vegetables, starch and grains, a protein, and then they had a dairy food to supplement that, whether that was cow's milk or plant-based milk or yogurt or cheese, some kind of dairy food. Those kids are significantly less likely to develop nutrient deficiencies. So when we're going through and we're doing screenings for kiddos and we're talking with families and meeting them for the first time, we get a really good diet recall and we know what a safe food and an unsafe food list is and what foods we currently have in our diet. And those are the food groups that we're looking for, is that group fruits and vegetables, how many starches we have, protein foods that we have, and then we'll try to figure out, do we have any nutrient deficiencies from there? And are there recommendations that we can make to the feeding team for the next food groups to work on in order to be able to optimize our overall nutrition? So we always, for our selective eaters, recommend that they get involved with a feeding therapist. That's a really important step. Those are the individuals who are meeting with your child on like weekly or regular, every other week, very regular basis, where you may only meet with a dietitian quarterly or twice a year whenever you come in and see the specialist in the clinical office that you're working with. So from our perspective, if we do have some selective eating going on, what we'll look at it is, are we gaining weight? Or are we not gaining weight? And if we're gaining weight, then we're going to support with feeding therapy referrals, any kind of vitamin or mineral supplementation that's needed, or kind of screening labs to assess deficiencies. Vitamin D and iron are the most common deficiencies that we see in clinic. A large number of our kiddos have vitamin D and iron deficiencies, even if it's subclinical. So even if it doesn't necessarily come up as being low on the results, so flagging as a bright red color, you can still have subclinical deficiencies and we'll still supplement in those scenarios. Those are the most common, but we're going to go through probably like the top 6 or 7 that we'll see often in clinic, but vitamin D and iron are the most common ones. And the reason why I bring these up is because 1, they're common, and 2, these are linked to sleep. And so having lower levels can cause sleep issues as well. So I really want to focus on the pie chart that's over on the left, because those are going to be the ones that are most common in our kiddos that we're talking with. We were talking earlier about like the grains, the fruits and vegetables, meat and fish and dairy. So the nutrients that we're looking at, if we have a kid who's not eating foods that have grains, we're thinking about fortified grains, so iron, vitamin B12, B vitamins, grains. If you're eating whole grains, is a good fiber source as well. Fruits and vegetables, you're getting vitamin C from fruits and vegetables. And this is, we have kiddos who don't eat any fruits and vegetables, probably I would say like the 3rd most common deficiency that we see. And this can go from anything from like muscle weakness to different kinds of hair abnormalities and things that can like pop up on a physical exam. So this is a level that we check pretty frequently. Juice does count for vitamin C, so we will have some kids who are getting needs, you know, from juice, even if they're not eating solid fruits and vegetables. But if we're not eating solid fruits and vegetables, fiber is another big one that we're going to have a lot less of. And then folate and magnesium are some other nutrients that sometimes we see some more deficiencies for in these kiddos. For dairy, it's a lot more of the bone health vitamins, so calcium, vitamin D, magnesium, that we see deficiencies potentially there. Protein foods, so meats and fish, B12 again is another big one. Iron, zinc, selenium would be some of our top other nutrients. And as you can see in this pie chart, there's a lot of overlap. So B12 is going to be in grains and meat and fish and dairy. So as long as I have at least one of those, I'm probably getting B12 in. But if I'm not doing dairy and I don't do fatty fish, maybe I'm not getting as much vitamin D in as well. So we kind of look at this as more as a cohesive pattern. And then I put the chart on the right-hand side because, again, dietitians are a little bit more type A, and I love everything that's all spelled out with the dark green leafy vegetables and the orange vegetables. But we don't see a lot of like vitamin D deficiency or things like that in our kiddos. So this is a little bit more in detail. Ones that we're going to focus on are the nutrients that are on that left pie chart because these are the ones that we see more in clinical practice.
So sometimes we work with children who just have more trouble gaining weight or growing. And so we need to work on supplementing calories so that they do grow. And so we call them calorie boosters, which essentially are foods that can be helpful for kids that are having faltering weight, depending on what they are or are not willing to try. So we wanted to talk about some practical ideas and strategies to help your child gain weight. And so we put some different options and ideas up there. So 7 ounces of whole milk and 1 ounce of heavy cream has the same calories as something like Pediasure. It's also sometimes more affordable than Pediasure. We generally recommend limiting to 16 to 20 ounces a day. So this would be something you could do at home to try and get comparable calories. Some other things we talk about are adding butter or oil when you're preparing meals or dishes, and 1 tablespoon of olive oil adds about 120 calories. And so I tell families often, even just cooking something in a pan in the morning with breakfast with olive oil, you're adding calories that way, which is great. I have gotten or received a lot of questions regarding like the sugar content in like supplemental shakes and things like that. And at the end of the day, sugar can help meet or match some of those gaps we're experiencing. We have faltering weight. So if I have a kiddo who, you know, needs to take several Pediasure to get the calories that they need, that's really the only thing they want to consume. I don't want that family to feel guilt or shame for having their child not consume what would be considered by social media as a soul food source, right? Which it is. Pediasure contains, it's a complete source of nutrition. It has a lot of the vitamins and minerals that our kids need. So it's actually a really great option. Other things like dips are really helpful for adding calories. Pesto, hummus, mayo, gravy, guacamole, Alfredo sauce. All of these things can help your child grow. They have great calories. As someone whose own child doesn't eat pesto, gravy, some of these dips, you know, we recognize what we're saying. Again, if you can take away one thing from this entire presentation, we are happy campers up here. Okay. Potatoes, peas, squash, corn, different veggie and fruit options that we've listed up here are higher calorie. They can be helpful when working with our smaller kiddos too. If you think about like pureed baby foods and things like that, we have younger kiddos who are taking in more solids. These are some baby foods that you can try and utilize as well to add some calories. And then lastly, we really enjoy our egg cups as dietitians for breakfast. We add heavy cream, potatoes, cheese. There are tons of recipes out there. You can make them in muffin tins. You can bake them or steam them, really whatever your child is willing to take. But these are really great, like on-the-go options too, to help your child grow. And so one of the things we wanted to talk about is protein. I feel like that's all over the internet right now. We should have protein in our shower curtains, apparently, according to the internet. Protein does a lot of really great things for our body. It helps with growth and repair of tissues, muscle tissue, skin, hair, nails, all these wonderful things. It's great for immune support, so it helps with the development of antibodies that help prevent us get sick or help us when we are sick. And then it also helps with enzymes. And enzymes essentially help break things down. I explain it in clinic that it's like a Pac-Man. So if you think about lactose, which is milk sugar, and then lactase, which is the enzyme that breaks it down, if you think about a Pac-Man, the lactase is going to go and it's going to break it down. So protein does a really great job with us with those things. And then it also helps with appetite control. So protein works a lot with different hormones in our body that helps with satiety or feeling full or the feeling of hunger. So protein is a really good option to help us stay fuller longer. And it is also helpful for blood sugar regulation, and it takes longer to digest. So it actually just helps us stay fuller longer. So biggest question, how much protein do you really need? Do you need it in your shower curtain? Do you need it with breakfast, lunch, dinner, all your snacks? Every single person's protein needs are individualized, which I know isn't helpful as a parent. Most kids are meeting a lot of their protein needs. There are instances when they aren't, but for the most part, if your child has some sort of protein with a meal or a snack, they're probably doing fine. So if your kid has eggs for breakfast, you don't need to add protein pancakes, right? If they eat some peanut butter with a snack, you don't need to add cheese or adult protein shakes I'm seeing really often, or protein powders being given to children with 30 plus grams of protein. Most kiddos don't need that much protein. So this is me safely saying you don't need protein in every single thing that you consume. We added some practical ideas for ways to get more protein in if we are trying to do that. A lot of our kiddos that we work with don't eat meat pretty regularly. But sources can include meat, poultry, fish, shellfish, eggs, legumes like beans, meat alternatives, dairy foods, so yogurt, cheeses, nuts, and seeds. So take advantage again of those dips like black bean or hummus. Hummus cups work really well with some of the kiddos I work with. Families will say, well, shouldn't we pair them with vegetables, or should we pair them with pita bread, or what should we do? My own child will just take a serving spoon that we use at Thanksgiving and just eat hummus out of a bowl. Again, getting away from food rules. Let's get creative. You can blend white beans into marinara sauce, peanut butter on toast, or things like a granola bar. We add sprinkles at home to yogurt to get our kiddo to eat yogurt. She's very particular. She only likes one kind, and it has to have sprinkles, and they have to be Christmas sprinkles. Cottage cheese to pancakes is a good option. Making homemade popsicles with Greek yogurt fruit, or blending things like hemp hearts or flaxseed, which will also add some additional fiber, are really great options. You can do things like pinwheels or spread cream cheese onto a graham cracker with some strawberries. Those are some really good ways. It's a little sweeter. And for our tube-fed kiddos, we can blend protein-rich foods depending on the food size or the tube size, and higher protein pouches like Serenity Kids brand. They have chicken, beef, salmon, turkey, lots of different ways that we can add protein that way. I believe they have like 4 grams of protein in each pouch, which is a good amount. Something we wanted to touch on was fluid, since there are questions regarding constipation. So our primary source of fluid should be water, with 2 to 3 cups of milk per day, depending on your child's age, and then 4 to 8 ounces of juice, dependent on age as well. And we try to utilize 100% juices. And like I said, fluid is important for constipation. So if you want things to move in the body, you need something to move it, right? We put the general fluid goals up here for children. I'll let you guys kind of look over that. Every child is different. And so just some things to kind of consider. Again, these are general guidelines. Some kids need more when it's really hot out. Some kids need less. Every child is different, but these are general recommendations. And then some practical ideas. So flavor water with herbs or juices, use fun straws or containers, offer high water content fruits. And then for our tube-fed kiddos, always discuss this with your medical team. Sometimes having the water flushes before feeds instead of after or between feeds may be better tolerated. So these are some different ways to get fluid in. And then fiber. Goal is overall more variety. There's different types of fiber, soluble, insoluble. To be honest, as a dietitian, it can be very complex when working with families to say, if you need soluble fiber, eat these foods. If you need insoluble fiber, eat these foods. Yes, some contain more of one type than another, but at the end of the day, a lot of foods contain both. And so your goal should be variety. We want to keep stools softened and regular. And fiber is also something that helps with things like blood sugar regulation. It helps us stay fuller longer. So we love fiber. Sources include things like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts, and seeds. We get a lot of questions about like fiber supplements and probiotics. And a lot of fiber supplements can be expensive, especially the gummies. And they work for some of the kiddos that I work with, and they don't for others. So it's not something I overly recommend. Same with probiotics. The research is still very limited just because there are so many different strains of probiotics. And so, not that they're necessarily doing anything bad. If they're working really well for your child and helping with their regularity, that's great. But we're not going out of our way to recommend a specific strain or anything like that. And then here we listed some other practical strategies, like Metamucil has psyllium husk, so these are some things you can sprinkle. Frozen vegetables, rinsed, canned. I don't ever want families to feel like they can't use canned or frozen items. I think those are great opportunities to get things in. And then for tube-fed kiddos, jarred stage 2 prunes, pears, utilizing things like real food blends is a really great way to get additional fiber as well.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the micronutrient deficiencies that we see. So I've got like 4 or 5 of these that we're going to kind of go into a little bit of detail, what they do, what food groups we can get in, and some practical tips for them as well. So vitamin C, what I was talking about earlier, this is the antioxidant that helps support immunity, and this is the deficiency that we see a lot of times when we're not eating fruits and vegetables. Your body doesn't make vitamin C on its own, so we do need to get it from the foods that we eat. All sorts of fruits and vegetables are listed on here. So oranges, strawberry, broccoli, bell peppers, tomatoes, and even potatoes are sources of vitamin C. So one of our goals is to try to serve fruits and vegetables at side meals. So the data shows that 5 servings a day is linked with significant health benefits, and this is for kids and this is for adults. So just trying to do more regular introduction, consistent introduction of fruits and vegetables. If all we can get in are like purees or pouches, or juice, that still contains vitamin C, and it can be helpful for selective eaters while you're working with a feeding therapist to work more on the textures and the chewing and the piece. You can blend the fruits and vegetables into smoothies. You can roast different kinds of veggies, especially red peppers roasted in the oven. They puree down really well into other types of soft foods. Tomato soup is a great example, or Casey's example of blending up like white beans into marinara sauce. Those things can blend up really well and get some extra nutrients into like an already almost liquid kind of consistency food. Canned, frozen, pureed options. Frozen broccoli is just as great of a vitamin Z source, and it's an easy weeknight side. So keeping frozen vegetables on hand in the freezer, you can put them in the microwave and like sprinkle some cheese on it or something like that. And then that's a side that was done in 5 minutes and was fast, and you still were able to offer vegetables in that meal that contained vitamin C. For my tube-fed kiddos, the Bowl-Link small caps are really nice. They'll screw directly onto almost all fruit and veggie pouches, and then you can just directly administer it into the tube. And so that's can be a really easy way to get, some vitamin C that way. They connect with the infant extension sets. For iron, low ferritin is going to be linked to poor sleep quality, and bleeding is going to cause increased iron losses. Typically, if you were like looking at a ferritin lab, a subclinical deficiency, we try to keep our ferritin levels above at least 50, sometimes even above 75. So sometimes even if the lab doesn't come back as clinically low, we'll still go ahead and supplement with extra iron anyways, just because we know we can start to have sleep issues and fatigue issues and hair issues when it starts getting to that subclinical setting. Iron is found in lots of different kinds of foods. Primarily, the most well-absorbed source of iron is going to be animal sources of iron, but you can also get it in some plant bases as well. Like beans and lentils, leafy greens, nuts and seeds will be good iron sources. And then a lot of cereals are fortified. So like fortified cereals, breads, and pastas could be iron sources as well. So when I'm thinking about selective eaters, if we're not eating meat, but we are eating like fortified cereal, or we are taking in like crackers or breads or something like that, we get at least a little bit of iron there. And then what you really want to do when you have plant-based sources of iron is pair it with a vitamin C source. So those fruits and veggies that we talked about on the previous slide, those will help you be able to absorb iron much better. So if we're thinking about like specific examples, like black beans, that would be a plant-based iron source, and then avocado and a tortilla chip is probably fortified a little bit. And so if you use like fruit with an iron fortified cereal, like hot oatmeal or something like that, or even a cold cereal, those are ways to pair a vitamin C source with your plant-based iron and absorb that a little bit better. Red lentils are a really great source of plant-based iron as well, and so that mixes in with uh, beans and soups and taco meats and all sorts of things like that. Usually it can add some fiber too. Trail mixes that have nuts and pumpkin seeds will get you some iron. If you put some dried fruit in there, you'll get some vitamin C as well. Oatmeal cookie bites. Oatmeal is a fortified source of iron, and you can use rolled oats, which are going to give you fiber as well. Ground flaxseed, nut butter, maple syrup to all combine that together, and that's a pretty bite-sized, easily palatable way of iron. Frozen meatballs in a crock pot, the jar of tomato sauce, a little bit of vitamin C, especially if you add some roasted red pepper to that. It's a really easy weeknight meal, and it gets you kind of double iron there too. When it comes to iron supplementation, always check with your provider on if your kiddo really needs additional iron. Again, we do a lot of labs for this. Iron is toxic in too high of levels, so you don't want to just go out and get iron supplements that are above what like a typical multivitamin would provide. For tube-fed kids, liquid iron goes in pretty easily. Usually the kiddos that have the most trouble getting iron supplements are the ones who are eating it by mouth, because ferrous sulfate doesn't always taste really great. I'm seeing some shaking heads in the audience. So what I usually recommend, Renzo's has a meltable iron tab that's really good, and a lot of my kids will do. Novoferrum has a liquid flavored iron supplement that's pretty palatable. And then Berry Melt, which is actually a company that makes like bariatric multivitamins, they'll have higher dose multiple tabs that are flavored, and a lot of these are already paired with vitamin C as well. So they're a little bit easier digested, a little bit easier. But again, always talk with your doctor about it, because we don't want to just give iron without having checked labs and making sure that's closely followed. Vitamin D, this is another really common deficiency that we see, especially being up in Indiana. A lot of vitamin D can come from sun exposure, and we don't get great sun exposure up here just because of the angle of the sun, and it's cold and we want to be inside all throughout the winter. So this is a really common deficiency. Again, subclinical levels, if we're seeing something less than 50, you might start to see some more sleep issues. So a lot of times in our developmental medicine clinic, we target a little bit higher levels of vitamin D, and we'll be a little bit quicker to start supplementation for vitamin D. It's important for immune support, building and maintaining that bone density, very important. There's not a huge diverse group of foods that vitamin D is going to be in, but it is going to be in fortified milks. And so fortified, like plant-based milk, so even if you're drinking soy milk, you're going to get some vitamin D in there. Yogurt, fluid milk would have vitamin D. There's fortified breakfast cereals, and then the plant-based foods, fatty fish, which is like salmon and tuna. Don't have a lot of kids that eat those foods. Beef liver, not a lot of kids that eat those foods. Sometimes I can, have kids who are eating like eggs and egg yolks, and we can get some vitamin D there. But this is one that I'm almost always checking if I have kids who are eating dairy or averse to dairy. or kids who just can't digest dairy. So this is because this is already more common of a deficiency for all of us in this room, just by nature of living, in the Midwest. But then also if we're limiting a dairy group, which is where we're finding a lot of these foods, it's just a lot harder to get in if we're not getting that sun exposure. So a lot of practical ideas for including vitamin D are going to be ways that add more dairy in, whether it's French toast or yogurt parfaits or smoothies. A favorite kid meal for vitamin D is grilled cheese and tomato soup, and just use the canned condensed version of tomato soup, and instead of adding water, add milk, and then you get double the amount of vitamin D in there. Some orange juice is fortified with vitamin D, and so if I have kids who don't do any dairy, 4 to 8 ounces of juice a day is typically what we recommend. And so if I can get 8 ounces of orange juice in, that's vitamin D fortified, and then we can do like a serving of yogurt or some cheese. That might be a way that we can get vitamin D in as well. Salmon patties, fried salmon patties with egg as a binder, again, a vitamin D source. Salmon's going to be a vitamin D source. Mix it with some breadcrumbs. That can be a more accessible way of eating salmon for kids because it has more of that like patty, almost like chicken nugget, chicken patty type consistency. Um, let's see, moving on to zinc. So also important for fighting off germs and for wound healing. This is going to be a food that we get in a wide variety of groups. So meats, dairy, nuts and seeds, beans, fortified cereals, and whole grains. So I don't see this deficiency as often, but for my really selective eaters, sometimes I will see it. It is linked also with slow growth as well. So sometimes if I have kiddos who are coming in and aren't growing really well, and I know they have a limited diet, I'll go ahead and check this level anyways, and sometimes we'll do some supplementation for zinc as well. This is an easy way to incorporate some more zinc foods into your diet. So hummus or bean dip with crackers or veggies, oatmeal with milk and mixing in some nut butter, top it off with chia seeds. Those are all going to be zinc sources. Smoothies with blackberry and avocados. Blackberry and avocados are plant-based sources of zinc that you can include in if you put some nut butter in there too. It's a great way to get some more zinc in. Roasted chickpeas or edamame give like a really crunchy, salty snack. And so if we really like crunchy, salty foods, this can be a really good way to get in protein, calories, and fiber, but then also zinc as well. So that's a food chaining snack that I use a lot of times. Magnesium, another nutrient that's important for bone health, similar to vitamin D, also important for sleep, and then reducing constipation as well. And this is a newer entrance for magnesium that I feel like I see a lot more often is sleep and constipation. There's a lot of conversation about that right now, especially like if you're scrolling on Instagram or TikTok or something like that, that pops up a lot. There's a lot of different plant-based and animal sources for magnesium. So leafy greens are the ones that I think about a lot. Beans and nuts, nut butters, whole grains, chicken, canned tuna or salmon would be some animal-based sources. Bananas are a good source of magnesium. And then soy milk or tofu are actually higher sources of magnesium than a cow's milk. And so a lot of times you hear, oh, cow's milk is great. Soy milk is actually, it comes out ahead for the magnesium. So practical ideas for including more magnesium. So peanut butter sandwich, magnesium source on whole wheat bread, magnesium source with sliced bananas, magnesium source. Putting in beans and lentils, mixing that into soups or ground beef. I think I've said this a couple times already, but that's a really great way to stretch a lot of different nutrients. Mixing canned tuna, magnesium source, chopping up some spinach, maybe not fresh greens right now, but in the future, some chopped spinach, magnesium source with mayo, serving it with whole wheat crackers, triple magnesium source right there. And some breakfast smoothies with soy milk because it's a little bit higher in magnesium. The bananas as a really high magnesium food, nut butter and spinach. So what about vitamins and supplements? As dietitians, we have a huge bias for food. So if you're going to come to us, we're always recommending food first. And we're going to go through the food sources and we're going to go through what you're eating, talk with your feeding therapist, figure out if there's food chaining ways that we can incorporate some more foods that contain these kinds of nutrients. In general, the most that we'll go for without getting labs first is just a daily multivitamin or a multivitamin with iron, depending on what your intakes are. But we don't ever recommend like single dose high like nutrient supplements, like a separate magnesium or a separate zinc supplement or anything like that without talking to your doctor and usually getting labs first. Now, we're really comfortable, registered dietitians can go through your diet and offer target recommendations. So if we think that you're really low in zinc level, we can talk to your doctor and say, hey, this might be worth, checking the magnesium level or checking this level, but we never just want to go out and just in general recommend that. So when you're scrolling TikTok and people are generally recommending that, don't listen to them, because the clinicians are always checking those levels first. Because it can be harmful to just give extra supplements and not actually know what the labs are saying. And then if we're doing a general multivitamin, what we pick is very dependent on what form the child is willing to take. And that could be chewable, it could be liquid, it could be powder. And then the specific nutrients of concern. There are some vitamins that we consider complete, which have lots of different vitamins and minerals and good amounts. And then there are others that aren't necessarily complete, but they're good enough and they're more palatable, and we're willing to work with those. So generally, the cheapest one that we usually recommend going towards is like a Flintstones chewable or the Walmart equivalent of that, because it's going to be a complete multivitamin. It's really cheap, and you can find it just about anywhere. Problem is, not a lot of kids like that multivitamin, so we don't have many that end up taking it, because it's a little bit more chalky. You do have to actually chew it. So one of the ones that we get this question all the time: what kind of multivitamins do you recommend? The ones that tend to be the most palatable, where I feel like we have more success for selective eaters or sensory eaters, NovaFerm Yum has a liquid one that's flavored. Renzo's Picky Eater has a meltable tab, so you don't even need to chew it. You can chew it if you want to, but it kind of tastes like a sweet tart. Animal Parade Liquid Gold, this is a more complete one, and it is flavored. I use this a lot more in tooth-fed kids just because it only comes in one flavor, so I don't have a lot of kids who are willing to drink that flavor, but you can use it for orally fed kids. Ella Ola is really popular right now because it's powder and it dissolves into water or juice and you can't taste it, but it's very, very pricey. We're talking like $1.50 or $2 per packet. So there's some families who have great success with that, but they're really expensive and it's not my go-to. A cheaper substitute for that would be You and Yours, which is right underneath it. That one's also powder, it's also dissolvable, and you can't really taste it. And so it can be a cheaper alternative. Neither of those are complete, so they don't have iron in them. So you would, if your kid had an iron deficiency, also have to add in an iron supplement as well. And then Mary Ruth Kids is another popular liquid option as well for a lot of kiddos. So these are probably the most popular ones that we see just in terms of palatability. And what we usually recommend is the cheapest option that your kid is willing to take. All right, so these are just some general resources so like General Nutrition, Eat Right Kids, that's run by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the AP Healthy Children website for nutrition, that's a great nutrition resource. Constipation specifically, gikids.org has a great constipation handout with like lots of different recipe ideas and some of the fluid goals and things like that we talked about before. And that's run by NASPGHAN, which is a GI association, and then CHOP, which is a children's hospital. They have a food as medicine, constipation kind of hub, and that's a really good resource as well. For tube feedings, I love the Ole Foundation. It's a community advocacy group for families with kiddos who have tube feedings. And then if you're ever interested in doing like blended meals, this blended tube feeding blog is a great starting point as well. So just want to share some of those. And then we wanted to leave time for questions.
I got a big one.
Yeah.
Peter's gonna take it. Oh. Got the microphone.
Okay, here we go with questions.
So I'm so glad you've gone over the iron. Can you hear me? Okay, I came loaded with this question. My daughter has dangerously low iron, and she's had every test done. And the nephrologist who actually did the most extensive tests asked me to come to this conference and ask how many other people are experiencing this. So he's concluded that the iron, she's getting enough iron, but the body is not absorbing it, and it's because of her genetic situation. So she's been taking Proferrin, is a plant-based, he said, she's been taking that for years, but still has dangerously low iron, and she's not anemic yet, or I don't think she's anemic. But the question is, what can we do? Do you have any suggestions? Maybe they didn't even talk about nutrition, but maybe I need to up her vitamin C to get the level of absorption. And will your presentation be available to us to look at all that? And what's your thought on that?
Yeah, so first of all, Lindsay, do you share the slides? I'm fine with them being shared. Absolutely. Okay, so that answers that question. So it does sound like she probably needs iron supplementation. You can definitely include iron foods that we were talking about before.
But she's been taking Proferin for
Yeah,
years and years.
so,
And she was taking 2 tablets a day,
yeah.
but then that's causing constipation. So
Yeah.
we just backed it up to 1.
Mhm. So I will say that the type of iron can make a big difference on like some constipation and GI symptoms. So if it's like a carbonyl iron or it's a ferrous sulfate, so what the iron is bound to can affect some GI symptoms. And so like the Renzos and the berry melts I was talking about before, those would be like carbonyl iron examples. And so sometimes you can give higher doses of iron than what might be tolerated with like a different kind of iron supplement.
Well, her levels have not gone up in years.
Mhm.
And so he just believes that the body
Yeah.
will absorb the iron.
Other things that you can ask your provider about if like alternate day dosing may help with absorption.
What's that?
Alternate day dosing. So there's some data showing that the inflammation that's released when you get iron supplements causes you to be able to absorb iron less the next day. And so sometimes if we do like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday dosing, maybe we can absorb iron a little bit better. And again, it's very targeted to your child. So would talk to your provider about, dosing strategies, but there are some other things that you can do as far as like what the dose is itself. Can we go up higher? If we change the form, can we tolerate a higher dose? And would alternate day dosing be helpful, taking into consideration her, other genetic risk
I
factors?
guess my question is, how many of you have linked to this? A lot.
Mhm.
All right.
Hi, I just have one comment on iron and then another question
Yeah.
for you too. Our hematologist, we have low ferritin specifically, and they recommended that we do iron supplements 2 hours after consuming dairy products, because they don't absorb as well. And then they're also recommending a transfusion or a non-transfusion. Yeah.
Because we do it's an alternate day,
Mhm.
the Barrington's a
Yeah,
and we're just not getting.
yeah.
So we do have that too for low iron. And then we do have a highly selective eater. And I know you came up with a lot of good recommendations for foods to help improve vitamin across the board, different vitamins. Do you have any recommendations for like really common kid foods like mac and cheese, grilled cheese, pizza, things like that, where you can like sneakily add in some of those where they're not as detectable, but just any like really easy tips and tricks out there?
Yeah. So I think it depends on what the nutrient that you're looking at is. So like mac and cheese is a big one where you can change the pasta type if you have a kid who's less like texture averse. So you can do like a chickpea pasta to get a little bit more fiber and protein. Or I have some kids who need more calories, and I'll actually like put heavy cream into the mac and cheese. Pureed white beans that Casey had mentioned before, that's a really great one because it can look like Alfredo sauce or like a clear sauce, but you can add in a lot of nutrients that way as well. Pureeing veggies and fruits can be a good way to put it in. So like pizza sauce, like adding in, red peppers or something like that, to add a little bit more nutrient density as well. What was the other? You said mac and cheese, you said pizza.
Grilled cheese.
Grilled cheese. Yeah. See what specific other ones for grilled cheese?
Well, I feel like for grilled cheese, I have a lot of families who, for some reason, are very hesitant to utilize butter. I'm like, go the distance with the butter on your toast. Like Kate said before, with the tomato sauce, if they'll do a grilled cheese with tomato sauce or soup, that's a good option to adding like the whole milk or the heavy cream. It gives it like a richer consistency. You can load up the cheeses. I have families who will sometimes just utilize like layering the cheeses like so profoundly. I don't always find that as received well. So again, I think kind of going back to like what Kate said before, like whatever your child's willing to accept, you know what I mean? That's what you do. I think sometimes we do our best as families to like sneak things in, as you said. But I also try to keep in mind like being also mindful with some of that, because I've worked with selective eaters who, when we try to sneak too much, it backfires and then we no longer want that food, and then it drops off a safe food list. So I think a lot of the things that Kate made for recommendations and just how to navigate it, I think are some good options. But for like pizza, grilled cheese, mac and cheese, those are a lot of our go-tos. I have families who'll add like frozen peas to mac and cheese. Sometimes it's well received, sometimes it's not. Just depends on.
Yeah, and like build your own pizza bars too, or something like that. We can expose them to different food groups. I think there's a question in the back.
Right. One more question that we do have to get to.
Oh, sorry about that. I'll let Lindsay direct.
Yeah, we'll do one more question and then we need to move on. But you guys can still ask some questions.
Yeah,
especially if you need to.
absolutely. Hi, so my 11Q kiddo is here, but their younger sister, has the diagnosis of ARFID. So she has the sensory type, and she can sense things so it's crazy. She can taste the difference in a manufacturer of the exact same product. Yeah. Same label, everything. And then it becomes not a safe food and it drops off for years. And sometimes never comes back. So we used Ella Ola because that was the only one I knew about that was unflavored enough, and you can add it to milk. So thank you so much, because it is exorbitantly expensive. So I was so glad to know about another one that we can try. And then and also adding cream to things. I was gonna say also, ice cream is another one so she's in the ARFID clinic at Boston Children's, and they basically said ice cream all day, any day, like don't worry about it. So she gets to eat a lot of ice cream, which she's really happy about. That she has like 7 food, no, at this point probably 10. And she stopped growing last year. So I really highly recommend these unflavored supplements because she started growing again and it made all the difference. She's still very tiny, but she's not skeletal like she was last year. So it really can help. Thank you for sharing. I also want to just add on that if we have kids who have less than 10 safe foods, I never recommend adding in or sneaking ingredients, because just like, this mom back here mentioned, kids are very, very sensitive, and the last thing that we want to do is lose a safe food. So our goal is to preserve safe foods the best that we can and get them plugged into resources and then supplement, and that's fine.
All right, since we need to move on, I'm sure there are other questions. You guys can just touch base with them individually. But let me give you guys your little speaker. Okay. I'm gonna turn them both off, okay? So we have a speaker for each of you.